For being here today. My name is Ravneet Kaur. I'm the Senior Manager of Business Transformation and Program Management at University of Toronto Scarborough, and I'll be moderating the session today. I'd like to introduce you to our presenters. We have one presenter attending virtually and two in person. So first we have Rory Macneil. He's the CEO of RSpace. We have virtually with us Terrell Russell. He is the Executive Director of iRODS Consortium. And then we have Bruce Maas, who's the Chief Information Officer Emeritus at University of Wisconsin-Madison. And together they will be presenting on the role of iRODS plus RSpace in a connected research commons at university and national level in Canada. With that, I'll turn it over to you and we'll take questions at the very end.
Okay, thank you. My role is going to be to start us off, and then I'm going to, hopefully after the session, set the hook for why you should be interested in this topic today. So I'm Bruce Maas, Emeritus CIO, University of Wisconsin-Madison. I'm past board chair of EDUCAUSE, and in my background, I served as an associate dean for business affairs for 17 years, so I have deep understanding of the culture of the academy. My part of what I'm going to start out with is to try and help you understand why this is an area where the timing is right to align with some of the initiatives that are going on right now. The first step, and the first thing I want to talk about, is over a 40-year career, the main thing I learned is you don't get anything done unless you establish trust. And, you know, it's a basic concept, and it sounds good, but it's really, really hard. So you have to, in this particular area, when it comes to supporting researchers, you've got to have support for, you got to get trust with junior faculty, you got to get trust with senior faculty, with department chairs, with deans, with all of the constituents. Like I met someone here from University of Toronto who's the IT director for the CS department. You need people like that on board. And so you also will need strong support, sponsoring from provosts, vice presidents or vice chancellors for research in the same position for the administration, because they're all major stakeholders and they're the ones who control budgets and investments. So the foundation is listening, and I encourage you that you really need to do deep listening. I came into Madison having set up a shared high-performance computing center at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, and I quickly learned everything I learned there is out the window. It's a totally different culture. The people are different. They don't want to hear about it. What they want to hear about is what you're going to do to be able to help them in their environment to be successful. So you have to understand the issues. Part of what I did is developed a campus-wide requirements initiative where we taught people over a 2-year period, half in IT and half in the community, on requirements management. And there's a whole language to it. And what we found is it eased our conversation. When we could talk about needs and we could help people to understand what they were really getting at was wants, there were many, many ways to be able to solve problems. And so, again, I'd urge you, really think about taking a requirements-based approach to having those important conversations. Now, in Canada, you've got a real advantage getting started here because you've got the Digital Research Alliance, and Mark Leggott is here. We've worked with Mark and we've talked with Mark, and it's frankly a real opportunity because of the work that the Digital Research Alliance is doing. How can you align in helping in your role? CIOs generally are not the leaders of support for research. They're a contributor. And CIOs really have to worry about all the infrastructure, works together, the cybersecurity, et cetera. So we're major players. Sometimes our community doesn't understand that need. Our job is to build that understanding, to develop that trust, and to be able to be there to align with them. Many people at University of Wisconsin-Madison do not know that I was the key person that helped get the shared high-performance computing center on board, because I deferred all the attention to the faculty researchers who were leading it from the governance side and so on. I was the quiet partner, and I really urge you to think about that. I'm going to turn it over now to Rory, who's going to start this off, and then we'll after that we'll go with Terrell. Rory again, and at the end, I'll just finish up with some final comments based on how much time we have available here. So thank you very much, and we'll be available to talk anytime after this as well. Rory?
Hi, thanks, Bruce, and good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. So yes, I'm Rory Macneil from RSpace, and I'll tell you a bit about how we got started, which goes back to Bruce as well. But in the meantime, let me give you an overview of what Terrell and I are going to cover today. So we're trying to address a problem, which is a pretty fundamental problem. And this language is actually not my language. It's taken from Scott Yokel who's the University Research Computing Officer at Harvard. And as Scott phrased it, the lack of data-centric and interoperable research tools hinders verification of data and fair workflows. This is language which 5 years ago wouldn't have been very familiar, but I suspect it is familiar to pretty much everyone today. Potentially, the research data commons that the Digital Alliance and others are exploring provide a path to enhancing fair workflows by overcoming these problems. So we're quite excited about the Digital Research Alliance's proposed research commons. We think it's a very promising example, but currently the vision, like other research commons, suffers from lack of interoperability between services and therefore data siloing. So RSpace, which is a digital research platform that we're going to tell you a bit about, and iRODS, a virtual file management system, we'll also tell you about, we've combined to provide a solution that interoperates with core research tools and enables research commons to potentially supercharge fair workflows. And the reason that we're here in Toronto, we're extremely happy to be here, is that we hope to engage with the Canadian higher ed community to explore opportunities for collaboration at both the institutional and the national levels. Terrell, would you please? Thanks. So this is the context, the research data lifecycle, which is, there's millions of versions of this research data lifecycle. I think one was put up in yesterday's McMaster presentation about the Digital Research Commons pilot that they are conducting. And it's pretty, it's pretty familiar, I think. It goes through a planning phase, through a data collection phase, interacts with data storage, there's data management planning, and then it goes on to eventual archiving, sharing, publishing of research, and then the cycle just keeps repeating itself. So that's kind of the context for the discussion today, and it's the context for research commons as well. So the problem is the lack of data-centric tools and lack of interoperability between tools. It's fine to have a research data lifecycle. It's fine to have all these tools, but if they don't interoperate, the data ends up getting siloed. And that makes implementation of FAIR principles impossible. It also makes life extremely difficult for researchers, coming back to Bruce's point. Research data commons potentially is a solution to this problem. And here again is Scott from Harvard, who I think he has quite a nice way of phrasing what a research data commons is. He says it brings together data with cloud computing infrastructure and commonly used software, services, and applications for managing, analyzing, and sharing data to create an interoperable resource for a research community. So that's the fundamental concept of a research commons. So who's providing research commons? Well, or who's thinking about providing research commons? Yesterday we heard from McMaster, which clearly is going in this direction. Harvard has already made some significant progress through a pilot they did where they've actually beginning to implement a research commons, and I'll talk a bit more about that later in the presentation. So it's happening at institutional level, but also happening at the national level. And the Digital Research Alliance is also, as you know, and this was a couple of presentations yesterday, looking at a national research commons. And it's not just Canada. There's other interesting examples. One in particular that we're also involved with is in Europe, the EOSC. It's the EUDAT Collaborative Data Infrastructure, which is also a research commons. So I'll talk a bit about that. And this is very much something which is happening not just in Canada, but globally as well. So the global developments are interesting to look at. So I'll talk about all of these in a bit more detail. So what's interesting, I was actually preparing for this presentation, and I said, well, I started to take a look at these data commons. And what's interesting is that many of them are structured around the same core elements already. And I think this is coincidental in a way, but it's also because those core elements are some of the key core elements. So I've just taken the Digital Research Alliance's proposed commons as my first example here. And what do they have? Well, first of all, they have a data management planning tool, DMP Assistant. If you're going to think in terms of the life cycle, they've got storage through the various ARCs. They have repositories. There's FRDR and Borealis. And now, of course, there's Lunaris is layered on top of that for discovery. So they have discovery. And then they also have provision of persistent identifiers. In Canada's case, they've got DOIs and ORCIDs. So these are core elements which I think any research commons would need to have. So Terrell's keeping me on time here. Thank you, Terrell. So the next example is from EUDAT's Collaborative Data Infrastructure. And lo and behold, guess what? They have the same core elements. So they too have a data management planning tool. They too provide a storage service. They too provide PIDs, and they too have repositories, and they too have a discovery tool. So it's interesting. It's almost the exact same conceptually as the Digital Research Alliance's research commons here in Canada. As I said, I think these are really, it's a great start, and I was reflecting a bit this when I saw the even much more complex slide from the McMaster presentation yesterday. There is a problem. It's a good start, but the tools and services aren't interoperable. So that leads to siloing of data, and it makes true implementation of fair workloads extremely difficult. Okay, great. So that's a bit of background on research commons. So I'm going to tell you a bit about RSpace, and Terrell's going to tell you a bit about iRODS, and then we can think about how iRODS and RSpace, we think, can play a productive role in overcoming some of these silos. So the slide, this graphic you see up here tells the picture tells 1,000 stories. This is the RSpace story. So 12 years ago when we started out co-designing this actually with the University of Wisconsin, that's where we got our requirements, a painful 2-year learning process for us. And the two things which Bruce and his colleagues, two messages they drummed into us on my many visits to Madison were, we hate vendor lock-in, so make it easy to get the data out. And by the way, our researchers use lots of other tools. If your tool doesn't interoperate with things they're already using, they're not going to use it. So if you go back 12 years, you would have seen this little RSpace there in the middle. And this ecosystem that you've seen has really grown up, informed by those two principles over the last 2 years. And I won't pretend that we ever imagined that this is where we were aiming when we started out. But we kind of stumbled and stumbled and stumbled. And wow, 10 years later, we've got what verification needs. It was more like by luck than anything else, but we got a really good steer from Bruce and his colleagues. So RSpace is a tool that plays in the active data management section of the research lifecycle, and it consists of 4 things. The original thing is RSpace, which is a fully fledged electronic lab notebook. In the last 3 years, we built a really powerful sample management inventory system, which is deeply integrated with the ELN. So those are 2 things that kind of at the heart of it. We have a powerful series of APIs for extensibility, is the third element. And the fourth element is this ecosystem which we support. And that's where the connectivity and the interoperability comes in. So let's ignore the purple ones at the moment, and let's focus on the blue. So RSpace is not a data, it's not intended, it's very data light. You're going to be keeping your big data somewhere else, your imaging data, your sequencing data, for sure, it is where it is on a store somewhere. But nevertheless, you want to be able to associate that with the write-up of your research. So you can make links to files which are stored in other resources which are relevant to the experiment or the project that you're working on. That's really good, but then there's the broken links problem. What if those files move if you've got a lot of connectivity? Well, that's the first stage integration we have with iRODS has solved that problem. So that if files move, as long as iRODS is, and Terrell's going to talk a bit more about iRODS in a moment, but as long as iRODS is tracking the files, if they're linked to an RSpace, the integrity of the link is maintained, which is extremely, extremely important. So we've also got integrations with more specialist tools that are used in some disciplines, like PIRAT is an animal colony management system, Cluster Market is an equipment scheduling system, FAMES is an offline field data collection system. So again, these are tools which would be feeding data or linking data to RSpace in particular contexts. We've also got support for chemistry, for biology. We've got a really important integration with Omiro, which is the widely used tool in the microscopy environment, which I think is very important. So we also integrate with things like Protocols.io. So we've got all these integrations on the research side. Now let's turn briefly to the purple. We also support the kind of research data management flow, if you will. So the purple is the research data management side. So we've also got integrations with data management planning tools on the planning, and then with repositories, so you can export data directly from RSpace into a repository when the time comes for archiving, storage, and sharing. And we've actually got a nice three-way flow. So you can associate a data management plan with the actual project that you're doing, the data from the project in RSpace, and then you can make an export into the repository. And when you do that, the repository assigns a DOI back to the data management plan. So that's kind of a model, I would say, automated workflow, which is very easy for researchers and which enhances FAIR principles. Again, this is always this graphic is always changing and always developing, and we've got some really exciting second stage integrations with both iRODS and Dataverse in the works as well. So that's a brief overview of RSpace, and now I'm going to, I think, pass to Terrell to talk about iRODS.
Yes, so I'm assuming you can hear me. Hi, welcome, thank you. I am in North Carolina at the moment. I'm Terrell Russell. I'm currently serving as Executive Director for the iRODS Consortium. And the iRODS Consortium is a member-driven organization at the Renaissance Computing Institute at UNC Chapel Hill. The goal is to be a sustainability model around the software itself. iRODS is a C++ client-server application with bones that have been around for almost 30 years now. The philosophy and the original papers still hold water, and it's how to do grid storage and how to do policy-based data management the right way. And so iRODS is a platform and effectively a programmable environment where policy of where to move things and when to move things and what to copy and how to attach metadata, how to extract metadata, how to associate things, basically doing all of the organizational bookkeeping that you might want to do across different storage systems and different technologies in a single namespace. This is important because it allows you to make strong claims later about what happened in terms of auditing and having provenance, as well as being able to connect research data products that have gone through some workflow or pipeline to be associated with its raw materials, which means that you've now got the possibility for reproducible science in a way that is otherwise pretty tricky in a distributed system. The other thing is because, like Rory said, one of the main goals for many institutions is to prevent vendor lock-in. We abstract all of the storage technologies and abstract the vendor technologies themselves, which is a lot to take on. But for the most part, since we're just doing the bookkeeping, the individual products that may be purchased to do certain things are still in competition. But now they have to compete on pricing and features and things like that, instead of the fact that you were already a paying customer before and you don't have much choice. So iRODS also, like all the diagrams that we draw, look very similar to Rory's. We sit in the middle and afford connectivity and the bookkeeping between disparate systems to try and tie them together and provide that discovery and I guess we're saying verification now in public. We laughed at that word for a little bit, but it's been a few years, so now it's real. And so I think the next couple slides are about how we would work together to do the things we do well and partner in a strategic way. And again, this is all in the open, so there's no. It should be safe enough to dip a toe in and experiment and build confidence over time. So Rory, you can take over if you want. I was going to say that together, I think that from my perspective, we don't do a lot with the GUI side of things. We have found that particular installations, particular organizations, particular scientific domains have very strong opinions about their words and how they want things to connect and how they look. And so we don't spend a lot of time in that end of the pool. We provide the ecosystem and the policy, and we are finding that specific GUIs tied to particular workflows and interests are best to be built either with us or by that community themselves. And so I think a partnership with RSpace and solving this kind of front door lab, from our perspective, opportunity, is very nice and allows the right tool to be able to talk to the other end of the pipeline, which is the repositories and the publication. And I'll hand it back to Rory.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so I think you've more or less spoken to that slide. Speaks for itself. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, great. So just briefly before I hand over to Bruce to wind up, so what does how might this be applied in an institutional context or a national context? Well, let's take a look at a few examples. So this is an existing example of an existing deployment at University College London of RSpace, and you can see that the red is where we've taken advantage of some of this RSpace connectivity and enriched, and also beginning to add some interoperability to the UCL, the resources that the UCL is already deploying around the research data lifecycle. So you can see that this involves the data management planning tool, the data storage, data publication, and deposit into a repository. This next slide is this is actually a UCL slide, but I've borrowed it. And they actually put it together for supercomputing last year. And this is kind of a vision which is, this is the UCL I think UCL has a very progressive vision where they've actually combined in an interesting way, coming back actually quite relevant, I think, to the McMaster presentation yesterday, where they're the head of their research, they're providing research computing and research services out of the same unit. So that the organizational piece is really important, of course. And so they have a vision of an integrated research lifecycle, but driving towards something. And you can see how RSpace is really at the center of this. And also coming back to Vince's presentation, for those who saw it yesterday, of making more data available ultimately for things like AI. So the second example is Harvard. And of course, each institution is going to be different. And this one is again showing how they've got storage, they've got a data management planning, data management tool. They use protocols IO. They export things to Dataverse. And I meant to mention earlier in my earlier comments, but it turns out that the existing RSpace interoperability is already highly appropriate, at least in a Canadian context, in terms of the integration with data management, a DMP tool, which is the same thing, basically the same thing as DMP Assistant. So extending that to DMP Assistant will be easy, and also our existing integration with Dataverse, which of course is a foundational repository in Canada. So we have a lot of pre-existing support for tools which are already widely used here. But anyway, this is an example of how this could facilitate a research commons, or will be facilitating, I should say, a research commons at Harvard. So then let's finally take a look at a couple of national examples. So if you remember the things on the Alliance's roadmap, so to speak, you've got repositories, you've got the ARCs, you've got storage, you've got the PID provision, you've got the data management planning tool, and then you've got a discovery layer. So this is a bit conceptual, but if you imagine that if RSpace if iRODS was crawling files and RSpace was deployed as well, that it could facilitate. It was my personal vision or dream anyway, is that the data and the metadata should be flowing freely around the tools, around the resources in the life cycle. And that's kind of the Holy Grail, which we're never going to get to the Holy Grail, but we could work towards it. And that's our vision for how we could, iRODS and RSpace could begin to make that happen in a Canadian context, as well as in an institutional context. And the next example, again, it's very similar. We're also in discussions with the UDAT's control data infrastructure, because actually it's very similar to the Alliance's vision, and exactly the same principles apply, and exactly the AIM opportunities apply. And in fact, iRODS is already a part of the CDI, and we're discussing having RSpace become a part of it as well. And again, you've got data management, you've got data storage, you've got data deposit, and you've got discovery. So it's very similar principles, and we think there's an opportunity to have kind of a connecting, as well as a supercharging, as well as a helping the flow aspect of the deployment of RSpace and iRODS in that context as well. And actually, I realized, Bruce, there's I think I forgot before you come up. I was just going to say, I think there was another slide in here, but I think it must have gotten taken out inadvertently. So just before, Bruce will probably say this as well, but Terrell and Bruce and I would love to engage with the both Canadian institutions as well as the Alliance, because we think there's a great opportunity here in Canada to do something exciting in the research data management space. And I was just saying to Bruce this morning, as we were walking over, we didn't have this vision 4 years ago, but we attended a number of EDUCAUSE conferences, and there was almost no focus on research. And I'm really excited to see the last couple of days how much interest there is in research, and how it seems like IT research data management is now really coming together in fruitful ways in Canada. So anyway, we'd love to engage with you, and with that, I'll have to hand over to Bruce.
So with that focus that you now are starting to have on research, truth in advertising requires me to say that our preparation for CIO, certainly my generation, it did not include supporting researchers. It just didn't. I was prepared for Oracle and Microsoft and Google and Amazon and all the other things that came. But there's like a completely different language here. There's a completely different universe of tools. And so in this area, I have more scars and deeper scars than any other area I've engaged with, because sometimes interacting directly, if you have a trust relationship with the academic community, means you get pounded, right? It's just part of doing business. I can't say that I came to enjoy it. It didn't get to that point, but I understood it and understood why people were so passionate and a little impatient, because I didn't really understand what their lives were like as researchers. In the end, though, CIOs and their teams are responsible for the infrastructure. So you can have it one way or the other. I mean, you can engage and help shape the direction of the research infrastructure that's going to be on your campus, being the quiet partner, deferring, understanding. In my case, I was told many times, don't get out of your lane. It's dangerous to get out of your lane. And I got out of my lane a little bit, and I pushed, and then I got back into my lane after I did that. And I'm just saying that some of us have pushed that in the past. There's been a lot of work done. You can see these communities are coming together. The libraries community is coming together with the IT and coming together with the research community. So the positioning's there. The new researchers you're hiring are looking, they've probably come from institutions where, there's been some collaboration going on. But we have to make sure that the infrastructure works and it's secure. And it's a lift. It's a big lift. However, I have not experienced anything more satisfying than gaining the trust of senior faculty. My provost, when I was hired, told me he wasn't going to ask me how I'm doing. He had a number of key primary researchers, what at Wisconsin we called the rock stars. At Berkeley, they called them, I think it was mountain lions. We call them rock stars. These people pack a punch, and to gain their trust is a very, very satisfying thing. I've been retired since 2017. I'm still engaging, but I relish those times when I can get back in touch with those researchers that had taught me the lessons that I needed to learn as a CIO. And the timing is just really good right now. Many stakeholders are willing to consider how to work together. The McMaster presentation yesterday, is a good indication of, a diverse team, including your, cybersecurity and the expertise in libraries with IT. So I encourage you, be bold. Canada's in a real position here to do some of this at scale. You have some advantages culturally over what we have in the States in our ability to work together. I worked in the Big Ten Academic Alliance. That is a very cohesive group that's been together 65 years. Started with the academics. They brought the IT community in, and we're able to do things together. Well, you have that with the way that your country works, with national centers, et cetera. And this one, I believe, after we had talked and spent some time talking with Mark Leggott, we became convinced that this was a real opportunity for the Canadian community. And so I encourage you to be bold and to think about how you can participate and to seek out some of us who have gotten those scars to help you avoid some of them. And with that, we're going to take some questions now. And what we'll do is, we thought if there's one from the audience first, and then we'd get one from the chat. Yes. Oh, you looking for a microphone?
Hi, Keith Fortelski, University of Regina. I certainly I appreciate the vision thing. I'm completely sold on that. I'm just a little bit intrigued about RSpace itself, as ultimately you would be a vendor. Can you tell us a little bit about the company behind it? Is RSpace your only product? How big are you? What else do you do? How long have you been around? All the sorts of things we would sort of wonder before we purchased the product.
Yes. So yes, it's our only product. It's a UK company. Got its inception with the University of Wisconsin. We had a prior product which thanks to the engagement of Wisconsin, we ended up, it wasn't an enterprise product. We ditched it and rebuilt RSpace from scratch back in 2012, 13, 14. We're an independent company. We're financially self-supporting, so we're not VC supported. What else can I tell you? What did I answer your questions, or are there more questions? Yes, we have employees. We have about 15 employees.
15?
Yeah. And our primary customer base is in Europe, because as I think everybody here probably knows, Europe is actually probably 10 years ahead of North America in terms of a vision and also providing finance and organizational support for an integrated research data management infrastructure. So our Holland, Belgium, Germany are probably our three most important markets. We do have pockets of Harvard is an important example. A really exciting new one, University of North Carolina, which has a very interesting, they've just created something, they call it the Research Data Management Core. I think that's an instructive term, where they've really empowered and financed, and this just happened last month, a research data management group which has money to go out and implement some of the things which we've been thinking about. The other thing I should mention, and this is new news, I made this announcement 2 weeks ago at the Dataverse conference, last week at the iRODS conference, and I'll make it here again. We're going open source as well. We'll be providing support and services for a fee in order to maintain our financial stability, but we think it's the right way to go. There's a lot of pressure on us to go open source in Europe, but I think it's going to be valuable here because it opens up an even broader scope for collaboration with universities, which yes, there are customers for sure, but I think Bruce can attest, and they're also our partners.
Thank you.
Yeah, the open source part I think is pretty important, because one of the things that we kind of pounded into Rory when he visited, and that was with our researchers, is we need an exit strategy. I mean, fresh in our memory was dealing with Oracle. You deal with Oracle, man, good luck at getting an exit strategy. So this further enhances that capability. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Marianne from the University of Ottawa. And a comment on what you said earlier about the research focus of this this conference in general. Like, it has really changed in terms of the number of research-oriented presentations here, and so there is really a convergence and a shifting going on. The McMaster presentation yesterday on their research commons, my colleague right next to me, Paul, has a proposal on the table at U Ottawa that is almost exactly the same, with the same three pillars and the convergence or the collaboration between IT and library and research. So I think there is something changing and going in the right direction. I love the focus on the data management lifecycle that you have. There is another view that I'm yearning for, though, and I'm wondering if you have thoughts on it, and that's about the researcher journey, the phases that the researchers go through in the activities they need to do for a pre-award and funding competition, and then it moves into preparation and active research from there. And I'm wondering if you've done some, like, using some customer journey mapping type methodologies to layer that on top of the data management lifecycle.
Yeah, so that's actually a really interesting question. And in one sense, the answer is no, but around the edges, the answer is yes. So it's interesting. So data stewardship is becoming, data curation, data stewardship is becoming much more important, and the number of people who are engaged in that is more important. And I think it's the data stewards, the data curators, who are likely to be the primary leaders of researchers through that journey, rather than us. So the way I think about that is, how can we better support data stewardship and data curation? We deal with them all the time. So at every university, after we're deployed, then we work closely with the data curators and the data stewards, who are often the people who are introducing the product to the researchers. So And one thing that we're actually doing is just discussing it in our weekly meeting this morning, is right now, RSpace is the ultimate data curation tool. Everything gets organized is right there, and you can deposit stuff into a repository. So what we're going to do is add a new data curator role into RSpace, which will facilitate data curators making better use of what's already in RSpace to work with researchers, and also facilitate the research. Some institutions want more active data curation, some want less, so we'll provide flexibility. So I think the answer to, as I think of it, the best answer is we haven't done a lot of that ourselves. We try to support, but we are certainly aware of the issue, and the way we think we can probably best make a contribution is by thinking about what the data curators and data stewards need.
Yeah, if I could add, data governance is extremely important here, and it's another area. I saved that for the very end of my career. That was one of the things I was expected to develop when I was hired, and I put it off and put it off and put it off. As many of you know, it's really hard. And we started with student data, and we started with finance and administration data, and boy, getting the research data part into it, that is a tough nut to crack. And again, you need support of your vice president for research as a part of this. But if you can include research data into your data governance and think about how the research and the academic community can kind of be driving some of those conversations with a little bit of help from skilled people who understand, the infrastructure and everything, I think that's time well spent.
So I have another thought, which is if you look at it, as I look at it anyway, it's kind of two almost contradictory trends going on. One is the data stewardship, the data curation, the more active engagement of people doing support with the researchers in their life cycle. But the other thing which is happening is machine actionability, making things happen automatically, to make it easier for researchers and make it easier for people to support researchers so that nobody has to do anything. It just happens. So I think that's the other thing we're doing. In the example I gave of the DMP RSpace repository automatic assignment of a DOI, where another way you can help researchers through their journey is to do things for them that they don't have to worry about. So we're also working on that as well. And for example, again, we were just discussing this morning, adding better support. This is a bit obscure perhaps, but better support for incorporation of ontologies for association with RSpace data sets, and then making it sure that the ontologies that are associated with the data sets can automatically pass through to the repository at the time of deposit. So you could have a link from an ontology, which is a public ontology, through the processing in RSpace to the ultimate deposit in Dataverse, so that is maintained, and all that happens really with virtually no effort on the part of the researchers. So we're also, that's another way I think in which we can support that workflow. Yeah.
So we're at time, and I encourage you to come up here. We're really excited about this opportunity. We think this is what Brad Wheeler, the former CIO at Indiana, would call a perishable opportunity. So take advantage of it and talk with us, and thank you very much.
We should thank Terrell as well.
Yeah. Thank you, Terrell.
Thanks, Terrell.
Thank you.